What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday to everyone in the chat who either will join now or post stream. I don't usually do early afternoon Friday streams, but I have a really great guest for you guys. Sterling Bennett from 95.7 The Game, producer. He is Warriors network coordinator and the host of 49er Access podcast. Been going back and forth with him on Twitter for a bit, and I just kind of dropped the carrot out there, and he took it, and wanted to have him on. And who knew Friday? You picked Friday, and it was like, man, we might have some news. I didn't think it'd be this early in the afternoon. See, I'm East Coast, but wow, they went right in there. They really got that surgery done. So, as everybody knows, Brock Purdy had a surgery. Everything was successful. At least that's what it looks right now. 3 months until he's throwing and 6 months until he's 100% ready to go. Sterling, first off, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm doing great. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. So an 8 o'clock alert of a surgery being successful is still uncommon for myself. I was having my morning cup of coffee and I said, wait a minute, already? It's really early for a surgery to be done.
I was waiting for it to be like 8 o'clock. I'm like, me and you will be talking about the what ifs.
Right.
But no, we can actually talk about it.
Yeah, it's perfect timing for this stream today. And I'm sure Niner fans are excited too. I know I put on Twitter and said, this is a gigantic sigh of relief for the entire fan base.
And I think I said this in some past live streams with the people I was streaming with and to the chat, that this is going to kind of dictate the 49ers offseason, the direction, including how much they're willing to spend for a backup quarterback, and two, just where they can, like, how can they approach, if they'd have to spend the money on a quarterback that maybe a backup level instead of third string level, that might kind of curtail and what they could do, possibly bringing in maybe one key free agent or something, re-signing someone. But yeah, the news of him, this whole situation with the ramp up to the surgery and the delay and all that, crazy. We had all Lamar Jackson talk going on. I fell into it too. Everybody did. What's your overall sense now that the 49ers have this news, as far as how they might attack this free agency period? Do you see them being anything but super? I don't know. They tend to be. They might make one big move and then they kind of lay back for a while. Would you agree that the Purdy surgery going successful kind of dictates now that they can do some things?
Yeah, I think whenever you get good news of what seems to be what the franchise belief is, that Brock Purdy was supposed to be their quarterback one if he didn't get hurt, whether win or lose in the NFC Championship game. Whenever you get good news like that as an organization, that, hey, your presumed starting quarterback when healthy is not going to miss the entire season. He is going to hopefully be back maybe September, October-ish, when it comes to being back to a full go. That does change your entire offseason plan, at least when it comes to insulating the quarterback room. We know Jimmy Garoppolo's gone. We'll get into that stuff later. But when it comes to who you bring in to back up Trey Lance, in the meantime, while Brock Purdy's on the shelf, a lot of that conversation was, do you go out and get a high-end backup, someone like Andy Dalton, someone like a Taylor Heineke, someone that has won plenty of games, has been to the playoffs in the past, where if Trey Lance falters, if maybe he gets hurt again, is not going to upend your season, can actually bridge the gap to get back to Brock Purdy. But I think now it's more so of, hey, like, if Trey Lance can't get us 4 games into the season, then my goodness, like, what an awful pick. But I am one to believe that this is an opportunity, and I like to think the organization believes the same thing, that, hey, Trey Lance, the reins are yours, kid. Like, this is your opportunity to do what you didn't get an opportunity to do last year. You got hurt. It sucks. It stinks. You got 4 weeks, maybe even 6, if things don't go the way they believe with Purdy's recovery. And I would like to think if they were okay handing the reins to Trey Lance in 2022 after an NFC Championship game trip where ends in heartbreak, if you're okay doing that with Jimmy Garoppolo still on the roster technically, I don't see why they wouldn't be comfortable going into 2023 with Trey Lance being your quarterback one. We'll see what happens to Purdy. Hopefully he's back. But if he's not and Trey Lance balls out, You have the best of both worlds. You instantly with the mid-level, maybe a back end, kind of a Joe Flacco kind of guy who's a veteran, but super cheap. Not Baker Mayfield by any means, but someone that can just hold the fort down for a game or two if Trey Lance does happen to falter, to get yourself to Purdy. A guy who's not going to need to go out there and win huge games for you for 5-6 games in this year.
I'm just tickled pink to the fact that they now have a really good starter and backup, whichever way it goes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's some people that have timetables on Twitter right now that are saying, I don't know if the recovery process is until the late August, and then he'd have a couple weeks to ramp up towards the season. Could he start? I don't see that. I think, like you said, this is kind of Trey Lance's thing to do. He really has to take the bull by the horns. I know he didn't have a lot of reps coming out of college, and he still doesn't. But this is year 3. It doesn't really matter anymore. You got it. You got to go. You either got to, the saying is crap or get off the pot. You either have to do it, or they got a guy who they know at least for 7 games, however many games he did it, was able to perform at a high level and trying to push this offense, at least to me, into places where they hadn't really been with Jimmy. Just high level scoring, like getting everybody involved. There wasn't one guy. The fact that he was able to take advantage of all the weapons that we have because he's able to see the field maybe a lot better than Jimmy and possibly Trey. But Trey really hasn't gotten a full shot. He's literally had 4 games. And it's funny. People will say we got what we need to see with Brock. He's the guy after, maybe 7, 8, however many games. But then in the same breath, they'll say, I don't know. It doesn't look like he's it for Lance, and he's only played 4 games. Like, why is one? How does one trump the other? How does they neither? It doesn't make any sense. So I think the Niners offense, if Trey it could become a more complete quarterback where he's not just a guy that can throw outside the numbers and move around. He can hit that intermediate stuff. He'd be so dangerous. And then they could attack parts of the field that they never could, even with Purdy. So you're right. It's the best of both worlds. They have a plethora of playmakers. A lot of people were talking about the trade, possibly trading for Lamar Jackson. And it just, guys, no. You'd have to upend this roster in order to do that. Yeah. And then they might still want picks. So what was your take on that a little bit, with a little bit of funny business before we got this news about this Lamar Jackson possible? Did you ever even entertain the thought, or are you just kind of shaking your head?
Primarily shaking my head, but let's be honest here. I think everyone in the entire world said, what would a Kyle Shanahan offense that you would presume includes Debo and McCaffrey and Kittle and Ayuk and Trent Williams and maybe a retooled offensive line in the draft? Who knows what it looks like? What if Lamar Jackson was the quarterback of that team? But then you look at reality and say, okay, like this is not going to happen. It's fun. In Madden 23, 24, I'm sure would be a lot of fun to happen. But you're not trading Nick Bosa and Trey Lance and 4 picks and all that stuff, because that's not how the NFL works, unfortunately. But with Trey Lance, look, I was someone who pounded the table for him back in 2021 pre-draft. I said, this kid, whether it's Justin Fields or Trey Lance or Mac Jones, Trey Lance stuck out to me. I said, over everyone else, whether he pans out or not, I think he can be special, but I think they're going to draft this kid because he can do things Kyle Shanahan wants. He's smart. He's good in the pocket. Now, the things we've seen Trey Lance struggle with, the accuracy issues, they were relevant in camp. They were relevant in the preseason. There are small things he has to work on. I know he had the mechanic stuff, but this is the biggest season of Trey Lance's career, at least when it comes to his Niner tenure. Because if he doesn't play well this year or continues to struggle or just kind of middles out and you go, okay, like he's showing some things, but he's not being consistent enough for us, let's go back to Brock Purdy. If he doesn't do that, well, they're going to have to pick up that 5th-year option pretty quickly. And you're sitting there saying, look, you're not worth the 5th-year option now because you haven't done anything for us. And I think going back to your point earlier about, many fans might say Brock's the guy, but I don't know, Trey's only played, 12 quarters or whatever it might be. Like, I think you can simultaneously say, hey, what Brock Purdy has shown us makes me believe he can be the guy. And I do believe San Francisco, John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, the way they speak about him, I think they believe he can be the guy, while also believing Trey Lance has the physical tools, the mental tools, and all the traits you would like to think can still be the guy. He hasn't played enough yet. We haven't seen Trey Lance. He is the enigma over the entire San Francisco 49ers organization. Who is Trey Lance? I don't know. I don't think you know. I don't think anyone knows. I don't even think Kyle Shanahan knows what exactly Trey Lance can be on the field. They have an idea of what he could potentially do. But again, if he gets 4 games this year, maybe even 6 games this year, like what if they're 3-3 and you're sitting there with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance has had some good games, had some bad games, but you're 6 games into the season and you go, okay, like what do we do here? We're in first place in the NFC West. Maybe we're tied still, but we're kind of, on the lower end of the NFC standings. We're the number 4 seed. Like we need to buck this thing and go for it all. And we have a guy who pretty much has not lost a single start. Like, how do you look at Trent Williams and Fred Warner and George Kittle and Nick Bosa, who hopefully gets an extension very soon, and say, hey, we're going to continue to go with the guy who unfortunately is still unproven instead of the guy who has won 8 straight games, and the game he didn't win was a game he essentially destroyed his arm in the first, second snap of the game. Like, how do you look at the veterans and say, we might potentially waste a season of your career while you age, while we try to find out what Trey Lance is? Now, again, Trey Lance could be awesome, and I hope he's awesome.
Me too.
But it's a huge offseason for San Francisco and Trey Lance.
I will never say that I know stuff or that I know, but sometimes like, nope, maybe I've heard from someone who's kind of close to stuff, and I'm just a YouTuber, but he's close stuff. When you intermingle with people, a lot of the veterans seem to think from what the vibe that they got from talking to some folks that were close to the players, the vibe is the players, they're all in on Brock Purdy. They understand what Lance has been through, and they understand that the kid hasn't really had a fair shot. But at the same time, a lot of these veterans know that the NFL has a finite window where you can stack your team and go for it. Look at the Eagles. Now they're going to have to, they robbed Peter to pay Paul. Now they're going to have to pay Paul, and they might not be the same team next year, but they got their chip. So, the Niners kind of could be in the same situation. I don't think they will, just because if they decide to go the Brock Purdy route, they can kind of elongate that window. But anyways, so I think if you ask the players and you really ask the coaches and the organization who they're more comfortable with, if the season started tomorrow, it'd be Brock Purdy. But you're right. It's like so unfair. But that's life, and that's athletics, and that happens sometimes. It's a meritocracy. There's no promise just because you're the 3rd pick in the draft that you're going to turn out to be anything. I mean, look at the whole draft as the quarterbacks in this draft as a whole. Has any? I mean, none of the quarterbacks have really done anything to say, they're going to be a future star. Like Justin Fields can move around a little bit, but he's still pretty inaccurate. Trevor Lawrence is, I don't know. I can't get a full read on him. He looks pretty good, but he's not Mahomes. You know what I mean? There's a level to it. And then of course, Mac Jones is meh. Zach Wilson is probably looking like a bust.
Yeah.
And then you got the incomplete grade on Lance. It's pretty crazy. At the same time, if you're running the organization and a guy's winning and that the goal is to win a championship, I understand and it sucks, but at the same time, as a fan, I want us to win. And if that means Brock Purdy being the guy, I really don't care. But I do care at the same time. I don't know, man. It's tough.
Well, it's a tough sell because as a fan base, you sit there and you go, okay, go back to 2020, Jimmy's hurt. It's very clear that something's happening, whether it's they're going to try to get Stafford, which Shanahan said they at least tried to do for a little bit of time, whether it's try to get Aaron Rodgers, which is widely reported to be, at least that phone call did take place, or then it's straight up to get Trey Lance. Like, this fan base was sold We are going to try to get an elite quarterback in this room. We are going to try to get a top 10 quarterback in this room to push us over the hump. And you draft Trey Lance. And again, none of this is Trey Lance's fault.
No.
He got drafted here. Like, it is like you can only play for the team that drafts you.
Right.
And luckily for him, he got drafted by an organization that did have some insulation with Garoppolo for a year. Trey Lance got some reps his first year. I know fans might say, I didn't agree with that. I didn't like that. He should have played the entire year. They got to an NFC championship game. Trey Lance won a huge game for him down the stretch. I was okay with that.
Right.
I looked at him and I said, there's a lot of raw traits there. I think sitting for a year, learning for a season, getting some reps here or there, although not in a 2-quarterback system like Shanahan tried, it's going to be good for him. Then you give him the reins. Garoppolo is supposed to be gone, and then he gets hurt. And you sit back and you go, okay, it's not Shanahan's fault he got hurt. It's not Lynch's fault he got hurt. You can be frustrated all you want. We all sat there and said, oh my goodness, season over.
I was that guy. I tweeted it.
Yeah.
And because you're like, the season's done.
Right.
I'm not going to front and say that I didn't do that because I did. So,
and I think it's because our emotions, whether you were a Jimmy Garoppolo fan or not, your emotions are tied to winning. And when you win a bunch of games and lose a lot of big games like they have the past couple years, and you are told this kid we're going to draft is supposed to be able to win those games, and unfortunately, he hasn't had the opportunity to even play in those games. And then Brock Purdy comes along. The emotions are high again. Oh my God, season's over. Okay, Jimmy's playing. We know what's going to happen towards the end of the year, but he's playing at a career high level. Then he gets hurt. And then Brock Purdy comes in and lights the entire world on fire. And you're saying, we may have the guy and he wasn't supposed to be the guy. So everyone buys in. We're winning. We're feeling great. And it rips your heart out in Philadelphia because he destroys his elbow by Hassan Reddick. And now we're sitting there saying, okay, that kid might be gone for a little bit. Might be gone for 4, who knows how long. Now, our season now lies in the hands of Trey Lance. And there is no proof to stand behind him firmly. There's hope, but no proof. And if you're a fan base who was sold a bill of goods that this kid can do this thing, you want to see it. And that's why it's so hard to sit back and say, I'm full bore Trey Lance or I'm full bore Brock Purdy. But I don't fault fans for saying I'm a full go on Brock Purdy over Trey Lance because you've seen it for 8 weeks. And you've seen it in 2 big games. You had like Lance has gotten no experience. And I think a lot of the fan base can sit back and say, look, Trey Lance is the guy I want here. He has the traits, he can move, he's cannon for an arm and all this stuff. And sometimes what we want ain't what Shanahan wants.
Nope.
It's not what he sees. Like, personally, I want Jimmy Ward back. He may say, I don't care what you want. I'm bringing back Deshaun Gibson and drafting a guy. And I can go, as long as we're winning, I don't care. As long as that 6th Lombardi trophy is sitting in Levi Stadium come the end of the year, that is all I care about. Whether it's Purdy, Lance, Garoppolo, even it's freaking Joe Flacco, I don't care. Just go win the dang thing.
I don't care either. That's crazy. Want to say real quick hi out of the chat, and then we'll keep this thing rolling. Raphael 562, thank you for always supporting the channel. I appreciate it very much. Ted, my dog, Ted Talks Ball in here. He says Christmas in March. We got we had the Brock Purdy news. I'm having my own knee surgery on Tuesday. Wow. My COVID test, pre-surgery COVID test was negative. So everything today was a good. Yeah, I think that's from Ice T, a song or a movie. Today is a good day.
Oh, it's Ice Cube. Yeah, today was a good. Yeah,
today, and then I think that's what he's referring to. We got 49er Media in here saying hello. Brian Culp, thank you so much for always supporting. Frank Tom Ocean, a longtime supporter of the channel. I love your name, Noodles. He says, even if we did start off 3-3 next year, that would still be unfair to Lance because he had a slow start. We've had a slow start the past 2 years, which is true.
It's true.
And how about them Niners is referring to something that we'll probably touch on in a bit. Just, free agency where I think the Niners are probably going to spend their money. He was talking about Ben Jones, Titans center, was just released. So a lot of interesting players getting released today. Adam Thielen, Ben Jones. It's been an interesting offseason so far. A lot of people are there. I've heard there's trade rumors for the running back for
Dalvin Cook. There's Derrick Henry.
Derrick Henry. I told my brother because he's a Dolphins fan. He's like, no, he's washed up. He's old. I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? He's
Carry the
still
offense for the past
he's
4 years. I wouldn't call
he's
him
still
washed.
pretty good. And with that offense, with the weapons on the outside, it would be wow. That'd be like a really awkward offense to deal with because if you play the run to stop Henry and you have those weapons on the outside,
Right.
that would be weird. I don't know if that ever would work with that type of offense, but it's definitely something to think about. Guess we could jump off the quarterback talk for a while. I read something that we won't know the restructures until probably next week. I don't know if that's even after free agency starts. I don't know if you know anything of that sort where they, the restructures and the money we save kick in while after we get like the news of who the Niners are going after free agency. Is that do you know if there's any truth to that?
From recollection, I believe that San Francisco restructured George Kittle last year and like somewhere in the middle of free agency to free up more money and to
Okay.
extend certain guys. So look, they're going to be restructuring guys, whether it's 2, 3, 4 guys. I don't know whether it's, it doesn't matter who it is, but like they are going to restructure, whether it's Chris McCaffrey, which to me makes the most sense knowing they didn't make that contract. I think someone like Trent Williams could get restructured again. Even someone like Fred Warner, like this team, I don't think they're going to free up $60 million or $40 million. They're going to want to have enough money to pay for the draft class, whether it's 11 picks or they're trading picks away. I don't know. But whether it's you get paid for the draft class, and I do think they're going to want to add 2 or 3 free agent guys, whether it's one top end guy and 2 veteran guys who just kind of piece the roster together.
Yeah.
But you have 11 picks, like that's a lot of money. Now, thankfully, that's not a first and second round pick, which take up a lot of cap for draft classes. But I think we'll get the news of restructures a week, maybe even 2 weeks away. But I think that CMC one's probably going to be a priority for them early.
Yeah, they did make a move prior to free agency. They re-signed Colton McKivitz. I talked to my buddy Raj from RSF Niners. We were talking. We had a live stream. He's like, Aaron, I know you're not a big fan of what I'm about to tell you, but I think Colt McKivitz, at least for the now, is the right tackle of the future. And I'm just like, it's so like underwhelming, especially for the level of team that we are. That he, I guess, for the short term will be the right tackle, but it's a 2-year deal through 2024. I'm okay with this move if they make a move in the draft somewhere middle rounds. Maybe even in the 3rd round and say, here's going to be our right tackle or even a swing tackle of the future. But Colton McKivitz, at least going into camp, is going to be the guy. I would be okay with that. If he is the only option and we don't address it at any point, then I'm a little bit like, man, that's really, I don't know. To me, it's risky just because if Trent Williams goes down, then we're, wow. So I would love
because McKivitz is the main backup for him.
Yeah, that would be crazy. So what was your thought on the McKivitz signing? Were you not surprised or were you a little bit taken back?
I wasn't taken back, and I wouldn't say I was surprised. It was more of a move to say, look, we're likely going to lose McGlinchey, and I think they'll bring in somebody, whether it's a 5th round pick. Like, let's not forget, Burford started almost the entire season last year. He was a 5th round pick. So I'm not going to be surprised if it's McKivitz and a 5th round pick battling things out for the right tackle job. I just think when you look at what this team has done, what the front office has done in the past couple of off seasons, you let Laken Tomlinson go, Aaron Banks takes over. Now, the difference is Aaron Banks was a 2nd round pick who sat for a year and had to get his body right. Then it's Alex Mack goes away, Jake Brendel comes in. The difference is Jake Brendel and Trey Lance, who was the presumed starter, he was his center on the second team offense. Coming into this year, it's Colton McKivitz, who has rarely played right tackle, I believe, in the past couple of years. He's been, the backup left tackle for Trent Williams whenever he's been out. And so now you're going into this year potentially with Colton McKivitz playing right tackle, and I think you have to bring in somebody, right? Like, as an organization, while McGlinchey had his faults, heck of a run blocker, not the best pass blocker, we know this. But Colton McKivitz is not an upgrade over Mike McGlinchey in any form. Maybe a little bit in pass blocking, but definitely not run blocking. Like, you have to get someone here or in here that can do both consistently. And that's why I think that the McKivitz thing didn't surprise me. If someone goes down, you got to have that person in the room. Swing tackles are valuable, relatively cheap deal, probably backloaded to next year, and then you insulate in the draft. That seems like the most obvious thing they're going to do this year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I like a lot of people, especially people that might follow the team closely, were not surprised at the McKivitz move. I kind of
Yeah,
thought that that's where they were going. I look at it free agency and I think like they got to at least make one sizable move. And if I was them, I mean, right tackle would be maybe it only because, where they're picking in the draft. But
right.
knowing this team and knowing how they like to run things, they seem like just from my thoughts, there is going to be a good amount of edge rushers out there for agency.
Yep.
Some are a little long in the tooth, but they would help you out for the next couple of years. One guy that comes to mind for me is Yannick Ngakwe. Um, Decently young, pretty productive, and uh, a lot of people think he would fit really good against the opposite of Nick Bosa. I think I read somewhere that he's not the greatest run fit guy, so they might
Yeah.
struggle a little bit. But as far as maybe a pass down, your second and longs, your third and longs, or even just third downs in general, he would be a guy. Anybody catch your mind? Yeah, there's Frank Clark, um, Brandon Graham, Arden Key. Anybody on those lists that you look at and you say, okay, they're going to do what they're going to do with Colton McKivitz and the right tackle. But if they're going to make a move, maybe they go edge. Who's you out of your eye on anybody?
Yeah, I think Yannick Ngakoue makes a lot of sense. I think when you look at what this team tried to do in 2019 when they acquired D Ford, I do think that they want that speed rusher on the opposite side of Bosa. I think they want that quickness, someone that can get in that backfield extremely fast. Even though Bosa's taking up two guys, he's phenomenal. He's defensive player of the year for a reason. If you can have that speed rusher on the opposite end where it's like, snap the ball. Oh my God, he's right in my face already. and I do think Ngakoue fills that need. You can find run defending ends for cheap. Like I hate to say that because they're valuable, but they're cheaper. Like there's a reason why interior guys like Ridgeway and Mo Hurst, who unfortunately hasn't played, and guys like Charles Omenihu were on the market for cheap, whether it's a 6th-round pick or a free agent signing. Those guys don't tend to make a lot of money. You can insulate the run defense portion of your defensive line pretty easily and for pretty cheap. So whether it's Ngakoue as a speed rusher or even buying cheap for Jadeveon Clowney. I mean, this guy hated Cleveland. He hated being there. And if you're a guy or you're an organization that wants a dominating physical presence, and you have Chris Kasarik, the best defensive line coach in the game, Jadeveon Clowney, whether it's a 1-year deal, he's gonna buy in here. He says, I get to maximize my market, really. I can hit the market next year, play next to Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead with the best defensive coach and a really good secondary behind me. Why would I say no to that? And Frank Clark, he's a guy they tried to trade for a couple years ago. Now, personally, I don't think Frank Clark would be the best fit as a personality in the locker room. I think that he doesn't like San Francisco. Like, look at every time they've played Kansas City, he's the first person to open his mouth. Whether it was in Seattle or Kansas City, he's the first person to be, he's always talking about San Francisco.
Yep.
I don't think he'd be welcomed really in the locker room, but I think guys like Clowney and Ngakoue make a lot of sense for the end. And again, the interior to me, it always looks like a place where they go to piece things together with veteran 1-year deal guys. Mo Hurst, Ridgeway, guys for cheap. We had Dwumfor and McGill late last year. Like this is a place they can find guys for really cheap that do one thing really well. So if I was going to spend, it would be opposite Nick Bosa as a speed edge rusher.
100% agree. I was listening to Locked On 49ers today. I listen to him and Crocker all the time. Peacock. They were mentioning a defensive tackle. I cannot think of his name. He plays for the Carolina Panthers.
Was it Matthew Ioannidis?
That's who he is.
Yeah.
Yes. As someone to maybe put in that interior that wouldn't cost a ton. And the fact that he's played under Steve Wilkes would kind of be a perfect fit. if they're gonna make any moves, I hope that they make 2 defensive moves and it's on interior and DN. If they don't make any other moves in free agency, I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine because we showed down the stretch and people were saying I would do streams with other people and it'd be like, how can you say that the Niners aren't, their defense is number, whatever in yards? But I would kind of dog the pass rush a little bit. People are like, how can you say that? I'm like,
Mhm.
look at the production other than Nick Bosa.
Yeah.
Look, you can say what you want. What happened to the Eagles in the Super Bowl, or what happened with Dallas when we played them? Those teams can get after the quarterback, man. Like every play, they're in the backfield. It's annoying. So I look back to the 2019 season when we were all healthy. You had D Ford and Bosa, and you had Buckner and Armstead. You had I'm trying to think of his name. He was the backup defensive end. And then of course we had DJ Jones. And it was just embarrassment of riches, and then you got the off-ball linebackers that we employ. And that was just a really fun defense. This year, I think linebacking and like say the linebacking core, I think were the best in the league, the 2
Yeah.
best. If you put them together, I think Hufanga's star is rising. I would be okay with Deshaun Gibson personally. Um, Although there's been some talk of Jesse Bates, but I think it would cost way too much.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
you would know, and are you more of the guy that if they made a move for Jesse Bates, you'd be okay with it, or would you rather
No.
just bring back Jimmy Ward?
Preferably Jimmy Ward, but even then, like, let's say they went the route of Jimmy Ward saying, "I want to be a top end safety. You want to pay me as a cheap nickel." Um, I would say, what is the like? Take 2019 for example. You had Richard Sherman, you had K'Wan Williams, and an unproven Emmanuel Mosley as your number 2 cornerback across from Sherman. Then you had Jimmy Ward, who was a question mark coming into the year, played great though, and you had Tart's a fine safety, but not amazing. Guys who don't get turnovers a lot. How did they make that secondary that, at least on paper, outside of Sherman, was not supposed to be great? They got to the quarterback, like you said. Like they made sure the quarterback was under duress almost every single play. And I think now that you have pieces like, Travarius Ward, Mooney Ward, and you hopefully have Mosley back, Lenore played great down the stretch, and Hufanga's looking like a superstar at safety.
Yep.
I think if you can add pass rush, those interceptions are going to go up. Fumbles go up. And let's say Trey Lance is starting, but even if he's not starting and it's Brock Purdy, any chance you can get a young quarterback who, let's be honest here, are more prone to make mistakes than a veteran guy, if you can get them the ball back, instill more confidence in them, say, hey, you made a mistake, we're going to go out there and stop and get the ball back for you. Like that's what you want your defense to do. And anytime Kyle Shanahan gets to call more plays for Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle and Debo and Ayuk, that's a win-win. Insulate the defensive line, get yourself an opposite edge rusher. Maybe Drake Jackson explodes, but I'm okay with him exploding as a superstar, even if it's behind Ngakoue and being a really good rotational piece. You can have 3 good edge rushers. It's a great thing to have. Go buy some.
Yeah, Abucom looks like he's pricing himself out. I
Yeah,
actually am okay with him not coming back. I rather would bring back Menahu.
of course.
He didn't do a total. I mean, he wasn't crazy getting sacks or anything this year, but he seems like a very capable guy that you can use as a rotational piece. He's pretty talented physically, but
Yeah.
he's not, like I said, I don't think he's going to demand a ton of money out there. But Abucom I saw was like 10 plus million. I'm like, nah, we're good. See ya. Bye bye. No way, man. Like, what have you done? You're a pretty good run defender, but like last year, I thought he was going to kind of take a step up from how he ended the previous season at
Yeah.
in the pass rush game, and it didn't happen. I mean, it was literally Nick Bosa, and then like the next closest guy, I think had like 5 sacks, 6 sacks,
Yeah, I
something like
think
that.
to give Ebukam some credit, I believe he had 6.5 sacks last year. I think he surpassed his career high for season total in sacks. But if you're San Francisco and you're sitting there saying, do I want to pay 6 or 10 plus million for a 6.5 sack guy? Or again, maybe it's a 1-year deal for Jadeveon Clowney and he can get you 8 to 10 sacks a year and he leaves in a season. But by the end of that season, you've insulated your defensive line. Drake Jackson has taken the next step forward and you are hosting a Lombardi trophy. Like, you're okay with that. I think anyone would be okay with that.
Yeah,
And so, like, if Ebukam's gone, that's fine. while yes, losing 6.5 sacks sucks, if you can retain someone like a Menahue who can play inside and outside, give your defensive line versatility, and again, then add the edge rusher opposite Nick Bosa, like that's a better defensive line than last year. And that's even without adding the depth they had this past year that was so important down the stretch.
Yeah, I see. Like, I don't, I don't agree with you on Clowney just because he gets hurt a lot. I feel like he
True.
gets
Yes,
his
he
money and
does.
he doesn't play. Nothing against your opinion.
Right. No, you're
If
right.
that's the case, and I would just go with a guy like
You
uh
pick Ebukam at that point.
no, I would go with the guy from the Chiefs,
Oh, Frank Clark?
Frank Clark. You
Yeah,
know, I because I mean, Sherman came into this locker room being hated by the fans and
that's true.
everybody else, and then he kind of adapted because he bought in. Um, yeah, there's a talk about Zadarius Smith out there. My friend Ted, we do a show every Wednesday called First and Ted.
Nice.
Zadarius Smith, I do not. He wants to be released by the
Mhm.
Vikings,
Yeah.
but I don't think the Vikings are going to acquiesce. So that would be an interesting guy to go. I'm all about guys that can rush the passer, and you know if Bosa's going to if Bosa has to be double teamed, you need to have somebody who can win on one-on-one, reps. You know what I mean? I don't think the Niners really had somebody last year that could win one-on-ones across from Bosa. They had a lot of good pieces or very
Yeah.
good rotation, but they just missed. They were missing that one other piece that could have made that offense a defense. And then you look at, um, you look at Kinlaw not being what we thought he was going to be, and this defense could have been a way better. People are like, well, they were number one in yards. I'm like, yeah, but the Eagles had like 75 sacks. We had like 44
Right.
or something. Like they literally had 30 more sacks than we had. So, but
But that's the
again,
thing is like take Zadarius Smith, for example, and no mean to interrupt you, but like
oh
take him,
no,
for example. He's a guy who I believe it's the past 3 teams he's been on. And let's take the Jadeveon Clowney 1 year, risk it for the biscuit kind of thing. Zadarius Smith is a guy who the past 3 teams, Packers, Vikings, and Ravens, after 1 year, he goes, I want out of here. I'm done. Get me out of this place. So if that's a guy you can acquire, whether it's free agency or whether, a rather cheap trade, he may not stick around, but if you can maximize him, like that's probably a much better route to go than Clowney. Smith is relatively healthy. He's a little older now, but he's healthy. He doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. And I would not be against adding a veteran presence across from Bosa. Someone that maybe they aren't as strong, but their technique is amazing. Someone who maybe the technique might not be great, but the speed is outstanding. Someone that has a trait you can just go, wow, oh my goodness. And I think Drake Jackson can be kind of this overall moldable piece. But right now, he doesn't have a trait, although he's very bendy. He needs the experience. And I think if you bring in a vet like Smith, or maybe it's Clowney, or even an Ngakoue, you can give Jackson, you can give him the reps he needs, the rotation time he needs, while also still having 50 sacks, 60 sacks. And in an NFL that is becoming increasingly more mobile at quarterback, Jalen Hurts, Mahomes, even Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, maybe, where's he going to play? You got to get to the quarterback. You can't
yeah,
settle for 40. You have to continue to grow. And John Lynch always says this: we are going to try to get better. Well, how do you improve the secondary, attacking the quarterback, and the defensive line in one fell swoop? Add a defensive end across from Nick Bosa.
yeah. It has to be somebody that can do stuff, whatever, like you said, whether they're quick, whether they have hands, something that they do that's really good that can help them win one-on-one. That's the one thing that the Niners, other than Bosa, just didn't have last year. The disappointment of Kinlaw really gets to me because there was a lot of smoke in the offseason, and I know there was people on lots of different camps about what happened. But at the end of the day, he didn't produce, and was hurt again. And I don't
Yeah.
really blame him for being, like you said, I don't blame him for being drafted. Niners drafted him knowing all his history with his knee, and they did it anyway. So that's poo poo on them. They need production from the interior defensive line too. They got to have someone that can hold up against the run and also at the same time get in there in the backfield during to get some pass rush because they just, they were getting just dog walked freaking in the NFC Championship game. Now that game was pretty much over into the middle of the second quarter, but still, they got to. That defensive line needs to be reestablished as their priority for this team because I think when they're at their best, was when they really prioritize that. The thing is, though, the better you are and the more moves you make that eliminate, draft capital, it makes it harder and harder. It's easier when you have an S load of cap space and you're drafting Nick Bosa to say, oh, look at this pass rush we have. Over time, that gets more difficult, especially if you finish in the top 4 of, teams every year. The chances of finding those players to replenish are lower and lower. So my brother was like, man, the Niners are so good. You have so much depth. I was like, well, that's what you get for sucking for a long time. You get to build the roster when you suck a lot. You got all these high picks and all these people who want to sign to you because they know you're desperate to sign talent. That's kind of the reason. So, but yeah, defensive end, edge rusher, opposite Bosa should be priority number 1 and 2 in free agency. Even like I said, even if it's just one guy, but I would love to see another guy in the interior too. Oh, what would you do? What would you say if they went and they double dip? Say they went after like a Justin Houston and an Arden Key, or would you like? As I had my friend Beto from the Niner Sickness podcast, he's like, you got to go all in on one guy, like a really high level guy. You'd rather not have a rotation of like guys that are like in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, what's the old saying? Don't put all your bread in one basket, right? And kind of rely on that one person. But not to push back because I get it, right? Like I would not be against them going and signing Zadarius Smith and then adding Michael Brockers for cheap, a guy who didn't really work out in Detroit and kind of was done with the Rams a couple years ago. And you can tell he's frustrated at where he's at, and he wants to win. You don't go from a Super Bowl champion to then being traded with Jared Goff, right? And so I just think that there are plenty of veteran defensive interior linemen that I think you can buy for cheap, or guys who look at San Francisco like an Arden Key, guy who can play inside and outside, which I do think adds to maybe, say it was a draft board that does get like a little star next to it for Chris Kasarik. Oh, this guy can play both. Okay, great. Like that helps me, allows me to, and even Steve Wilks too. Like that's the added wrinkle here. If Steve Wilks is or was a defensive backs coach, how does he feel? Maybe he says, no, like let me go add that safety. Let me go bring back E-Man, retain Lenore, let Jimmy Ward walk. Let me go add Jesse Bates. And we can kind of splurge on the draft in defensive linemen. Now, personally, I would say let's go draft the safety instead. And let's add veteran defensive linemen up front because I think that's more important to what you want to do defensively. But maybe Steve Wilks says, hey, like, I like Jimmy Ward. I want him here. Or, and this is a wild card, probably not going to happen, he was in Carolina when they drafted James Bradbury. What if he says, hey, I'm going to let Emmanuel Mosley walk. I'll pay you maybe a little less money, but we'll give you incentives. Go ball out next to Mooney Ward. We'll take a weaker safety group, but I'll have 2 lockdown cornerbacks, and we'll go ball out and be ball hawks all day. Like, there are so many possibilities. I know money's limited, but with the way San Francisco has set themselves up, 11 draft picks, they can free up $40 million in restructures. Like, the limit does not exist, really, what they can do in free agency and the draft.
Yeah, and as we can see with the Saints and sometimes the Rams, the salary cap does not exist. So it's just a myth.
Right.
But let's do a little rapid fire on the quarterback situation as far as the third stringer. We kind of talked about it already. You said it no on Mayfield, no Dalton. Brissett. Is he a little too pricey, or you really are in the? I'm okay with Joe Flacco if the situation lends itself to where we know Purdy's going to be playing by say like week 3. I would be okay with that move. Would you be okay saying that you're kind of off on those other guys just because of maybe the price tag being a little high?
So I think before today, I would have said, okay, like we got to find out what happens with Purdy. And
Right.
if he's out for the whole season, we got to find a solid quarterback to maybe you have to pay up. But even someone like Jacoby Brissett, who I know has the physical talent, he's never really done much to be successful. He wasn't great in Indianapolis. He wasn't bad by any means, but those teams were not good. And he wasn't great last year in Cleveland either. So, like, I don't think his market is going to be huge. I
Right.
think maybe a team like Miami might say, "Hey, we'll bring you in." But Teddy Bridgewater and Tua, both those guys got hurt last year. Like, I think the market for San Francisco, this is just me, I would sign a guy and draft a guy.
Yep.
I think what you want to do is even if so, let's say you start the year, Brock Purdy's on a pup list, he can't play, you can still have your three quarterbacks. And then once Purdy's healthy, hopefully, and once Lance, whether he's shown he can do it or not, your quarterbacks 1, 2, and 3, like you can let that veteran guy go or just
Yep.
not dress him. Like that's why I think you buy low on a Joe Flacco or a Chase Daniel, someone who has been around the league for what seems like 20 years. Like Chase Daniel, he backed up Justin Herbert. Why wouldn't you want that guy backing up Trey Lance for a short period of time?
Yeah,
And he's
and
not
he's
going
made
to
a ton
cost
of
you
money as
$7
a
million.
backup.
Right. Like it's, they always say the best job in the NFL is backup quarterback. There's a reason Drew Stanton, he wasn't good at all, lasted a decade. Like these guys are smart, they're intelligent, they can help the quarterbacks or the starting quarterbacks read the field, and they can instill confidence in a young quarterback. Chase Daniel helped Justin Herbert become a top 10 quarterback. Now, we'll see with Trey Lance, but someone like that who he's seen it all. Like, if you can get a guy who has seen it all, playoff games, injuries, whatever, every single defense you're going to toss at the young quarterback, you want that guy in the room. And then you draft a guy and say, look, if that veteran quarterback's not good and Purdy's healthy, bye-bye. We have this young quarterback that has traits we like behind him. And like, look, right now, I know NFL teams are recalibrating how they draft quarterbacks because they're saying we don't need to go top 10 because there's 17 Brock Purdy's down there. Now we know that isn't the case, but they're looking for Brock Purdy now. Like Brock Purdy changed, or at least to some degree, has changed how teams look at drafting quarterbacks. You don't have to get the perfect specimen to play quarterback. You just need a guy that can do what you want to do that has a little bit of a specialness to him. Like
Yep.
Fred Warner says, he has the it factor, guys. He has the it factor.
We
What
don't
is
know
that?
what it
That's
is.
unquantifiable, but he has it.
Yep.
But
Oh, go ahead.
no, you're good. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's you really in the best case scenario don't want your third quarterback dressing all year. He's
Right.
essentially going to be inactive. So
Yeah.
if you think you're good on the first two, you should not splurge. So yeah, I would be even okay. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I've been listening to Locked On 49ers and they've been kind of pushing the Matt Ryan as a third string quarterback.
Yeah.
Don't know necessarily a lot of people would buy into that just because he just seems so done physically, but
Yeah.
someone along those lines too. Well, I don't think he would command a big salary. If he does, then forget it. But yeah, you're right. You want a guy that essentially you can move on and release from the roster. Once,
I hate to
especially if
say it, but you do want a Nate Sudfeld kind of guy, but
that's
maybe a
kind of
little
the
more
guy that
seasons.
that's another guy that I wouldn't mind them bringing back, but I don't know if he would be come back for less money.
Yeah.
Quarterback wise, Jimmy Garoppolo. Does it seem like the Raiders are the team he's going to go to? I really don't want to talk about him, but I have to touch on this
No,
subject.
it's look, I'm someone and I would like to think you're the same way that can look at Jimmy's tenure and say, we didn't get where we wanted to be. We didn't finish or didn't cross the finish line, but it was a great time, a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of winning. But now it's time to move on. You can appreciate the past and still want to embrace the future.
Right.
And with Jimmy, I don't like if I'm Jimmy, I'm eyeing the Jets, but then in the back of my head, I'm saying, do I really want to play Josh Allen twice? And I don't want to go to the AFC West because I got to play Herbert and maybe a better Russell Wilson and then Patrick Mahomes twice a year that has annihilated me 2 times. If I'm Jimmy, you say, yeah, I'll go play Kyle Trask, I'll go play Derek Carr, and I'll go to Carolina as a new regime in there. Frank Reich is a quarterback whisperer for whatever reason, and they have a good defense already in place. Go to Carolina, win the NFC South, and we'll see you in January. I think that is the perfect place for him. DJ Moore's already there. They have weapons in place in Carolina. They just got to find themselves a veteran quarterback who can hold the fort down. Well, I do think they go and draft maybe someone like CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson this year. And I think it sets up for the perfect Jimmy Garoppolo arc, right? He wanted to go to the Saints last year. Things didn't work out. Now go beat the Saints this year in the NFC South.
Yeah, I didn't even really think about him going to just say like a team like the Raiders and having to face those two quarterbacks. Yeah, he doesn't want to do that because he's going to
No,
look really weak. He's got to go
most
somewhere
guys
where he
don't.
can. The only thing with the Raiders is there's so many weapons he could just be in the
Yeah,
background. But Devontae Adams seems like a guy who wants to throw the ball deep, and he has a noodle arm. I
yeah.
thought, I'm not, it is what it is. He just doesn't have a really big arm. Kicker doesn't look like Gold's going to be back, although it has not been, it's not an affirmative thing. Some
Right.
people think he could still come back. Do you think the Niners draft a kicker? I really haven't done a ton of deep diving on the draft just because I don't know where to start. But I know that there is a kicker out there from Michigan that everybody's oohing and on for that they think the Niners should go after. Or do you
Jake
go after
Mooney?
Jake Moody? Yep. And then, of course, there's, I think the Rams might be parting way with their kicker. And I think there's
Yep.
another kicker. I think, is it from Carolina? It's a couple guys.
Oh, you're thinking of Eddie Pinheiro. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple guys. What would you do? Just if you were the GM, would you pay the money or would you draft?
Maybe it's just me, but I tend to look at the last couple times San Francisco's been successful. David Akers was the kicker, and I appreciate the love Niners minded. But
Yeah, I got to say that, dude. You're on it, man.
thank you. But you look at when they were successful. David Akers, veteran kicker. Phil Dawson for a short period of time, veteran kicker. Robbie Gould, veteran kicker, who was amazing in the playoffs. I don't think that changes because the last thing you want is to draft a guy for cheap to save money and spend elsewhere, which, that doesn't mean it doesn't work out. Like you can go buy Ngakoue and go buy Brockers and go, okay, the kicker isn't as important. But I think we've seen even a team like Kansas City, who thought they had kicker locked down, looked at Harrison Butker this year and said, dude, you may not be our guy anymore. Like they're like Matt Gay, who was amazing in Los Angeles. They said, hey, like we can't pay you. And if you're San Francisco, you're sitting there saying, look, we may not want to pay for a kicker, but the last thing you want to do is get into the playoffs in Philadelphia again. You're down by 2 and you 50-yard kick and the guy shanks it. But a veteran kicker that's been there, done that is not going to get the yips. Now, I'm not saying these guys in the draft are going to do that. I'm just saying Eddie Pinheiro was locking it down last year for Carolina. Not a great team, almost a playoff team. Matt Gay has, like, you want to talk about Greg the Leg Zerline? I mean, Matt Gay might be the next guy like that. He's amazing. And I think investing in kicker, like the last thing you want is a guy on the line to win you the game and go, we didn't invest there. Oops. And you're like, Chase McLaughlin, Monday Night Football at Levi's, now the ball's in the tunnel.
Oh my God.
Jesus.
No, I forgot about that game. And then I remember I was watching, I went over to my nephew's place, his house. And me and him we're miserable when we watch games. People think we're not 49er fans. Like, oh, you guys sucks, man. Jimmy Garoppolo can't do this. Right. So we still had a chance to win that game against Seattle.
Right.
And he kicked it down the tunnel. And I just remember that game was so mentally and physically exhausting. I remember going home after that being like, after all that, that's what happens. So,
I mean, don't forget, like, I was on a plane from LA to San Francisco, leaning over in the seats, trying to see the person next to me watching it on their phone. Nice. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's tied, but Emmanuel Sanders gets hurt. I believe someone else got hurt early in that game. Maybe it's Eric Armstead, maybe. Then Drake Green lost pick.
It was defensive end. He was never the same. He injured his knee. And
was it D Ford?
No, it wasn't D Ford. I forget his name. Every time I talk about him, I can never remember his name. But he was a great rotational piece. He was like our fifth defensive lineman, and then he ended up tearing his knee. I think he was chasing down what's his face? Ronald Blair. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
that's right. Thank
I
you,
loved
Ted.
Ronald
Thank you,
Blair.
Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
Man,
And then he was pulling down Russell Wilson and did some sort of,
right.
and his knee popped. So yeah, but yeah, that
But
game. Go
again,
ahead. Go ahead.
that's not a situation you want to be in where, hey, we fought so hard, our guys are getting hurt, guys are tearing their knees up, like we're in the middle of a playoff race. I believe they were undefeated at that point. I think they were 7-0 at that point, prime time against Russell Wilson at home. And then Robbie Gold can't suit up, and the guy McLaughlin hit 2 kicks earlier in the game, one to send him to OT, I believe, and then boom, off the left, shanks in the tunnel. And you're sitting there like, dude, like, I know we don't have a kicker because Gold's hurt, but that's the last thing you want come playoff time.
Right,
Is
a
a
guy with
guy
the
who is in,
yips.
and then even then, like kicker's so crazy because you can go out and buy a guy and all of a sudden they get the yips and you're like, what the heck, man? Like you were 20 for 20, and now the last 4 games of the season you can't buy a kick, aka Brett Mayer from Dallas. It's like,
Yeah,
what is going on, man? He's probably going to be gone. Like they were bringing in guys come playoff time for him. So
it's ridiculous.
the kicker is one of those things where if you have a good thing going, you may not want to let it go. Like if Robbie Gold hits the market and goes, they nothing out here for me, I don't see why he doesn't come back to San Francisco. I think that option's still open despite him saying I'm not going to be here. So did Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, and I'm not, they're not the same thing, and I get that, but you want to win, you want to guarantee a spot in the playoffs. I think San Francisco is that place.
You're going to be
And
in
if
the
you're Robbie
tournament.
Gold, right, and if you're Robbie Gold, they're saying, where can I keep my perfect playoff record going? It's probably going to be San Francisco.
Yeah, much as his leg is a problem on kickoffs, I'd still rather have a guy that makes playoff kicks. Couple more. How much more time do you have? I don't want to keep you.
I got all day.
The Rams, full rebuild or what? They look like they're going full rebuild. I have a friend who's a Rams content creator. We had him and me and we have the guys. We run a show on Monday called the NWO Niner World Order, and he happened
Are
to
you a
pop into
Wolfpack
the
guy?
chat.
Are you big Wolfpack guy?
I was more of I like the original NWO.
Okay.
Even though I can't really stand in real life Kevin Nash or Hogan or Hall,
Right.
got rest,
Right.
rest in peace.
R.I.P.
They were so cool. Plus I'm old. I'm like 43, and like that's when wrestling was good. But that's a whole other show.
Right. Right.
The Rams, and I asked this content creator, I asked him, and he's like, I was like, bro, looks like your team's going full rebuild. Like they say they're not, but I mean they're jettisoning off players left and right. Do you look at the Rams as kind of going into a transition where the Niners effectively, if the Cardinals are kind of doing the same thing, it kind of run this division for a while if they can stay healthy and keep a pretty damn good team together?
I would say that, but then I watched what Seattle did this past year, where they got rid of their star quarterback, who was a vein in San Francisco's existence and has been a pain in the butt forever. Let him go, and still, although he beat them twice, still make the playoffs, or 3 times actually. But with the Rams, I do think that we've heard that Sean McVay wants to retire, go into the booth thing for a little bit, take time off or whatnot. We've heard now there's rumors that Matthew Stafford could get traded. I just think that the kind of, F them picks motto has kind of caught up to them a little bit. And look, they have a ring for it. Like I don't think they're looking back saying, oh, we shouldn't have done that. They're saying, yeah, like we did that. Now let's go and let's kind of care about those picks now. Let's trade some guys off, get some picks back. Let's go find, like, they draft very well. And when you're looking at veteran guys like Stafford and Aaron Donald, who are like, I might be out of here for a little bit, or, in a year or two, you have to maximize that. How do you do that? Get younger talent around them, free up some cap space, figure things out. Because in 1 year, I just think that the Rams could easily be back. Like, I'm not going to look at a Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Donald led team and say, nope. And Cooper Kupp's still there. Like the offense, like that team I know was kind of a shell of itself last year, and I think many fans can look back and, while not forget 2001, it's hard to kind of look back over a year and say, look at all the changes they've had and say they're going to be the same, but that's still going to be a competitive team. This team beat the Raiders with Baker Mayfield. Now, is that the Raiders' fault or Baker Mayfield's? How good he is? Probably the first part of that, the former. But still, like Sean McVay's a heck of a head coach. They're going to be healthier this year, but I think it's more of a retooling that might take a little longer than a rebuild, or excuse me, a retooling that could take a year or two, but not a full rebuild.
Yeah, I look at the Seahawks the same way. As long as the coach is still there, I can't ever write him off. And I kind of feel the same way about the Rams. They might have a down year this coming year, possibly.
Yeah.
But to say they're going to be down forever, I don't know. Again, that I mean, if the coach leaves and certain people retire, then they might be in a situation. Then they might.
All
Have
I'll
to
say
go
is
full.
it takes
Go ahead.
1 year to get Caleb Williams on that team, and at that point, that's a whole different roster.
Yeah,
And that's what I don't want to happen.
I want to be the Patriots and have an easy division every single year
Right.
for 15 years, where we're 6-0 by midseason and we don't have to worry about it. So the again, like I said, the draft isn't one of my strong suits. At least it hasn't been in recent years. But I know that the 49ers are looking at a lot of tight ends in the draft. Do you have your eye on anybody particularly? Then there's a name that's coming up. Go ahead.
No, I think that when you look at the tight ends, this is a deep tight end class. I think if you asked any draft expert, they would say defensive end, defensive line, and tight end might be the deepest they have been in 3, 4, 5 years. Wow. And I don't think that San Francisco necessarily has to draft the tight end with their third pick or one of their third picks. But if they are, I think someone like Sam Laporta could literally be maybe a smaller by maybe an inch George Kittle. Not as good of a blocker, but the versatility is there in a vertical offense. I think Laporta would be great. But if you're moving down the list saying, hey, let's use a fifth, sixth round pick, whatever, and figure things out, I think someone like a Braden Willis from Oklahoma, who is good, inline blocker. He's not someone like, what's the one, like when I think of the Niners and I think of what always haunts us is that in 2019, we had George Kittle in the backfield blocking on or in the Super Bowl, and it frustrates all of us.
Yeah.
And I look to when Levine Toilolo left for the Giants, I said, our blocking tight end's gone. George Kittle has to be that, that fifth or sixth offensive lineman, excuse me. And if you're San Francisco, you look at this past year and say, Tyler Kroft ain't the guy that should be blocking Reddick. And I know there's, scheme and semantic stuff there, but I just think you got to find a blocking tight end. That was supposed to be Charlie Warner. He ain't it. Ross Dwelly, he ain't it. I just think if you can find someone that can alleviate Kittle from the backfield, let him actually play a receiving, Travis Kelce's style of tight end, he can do it. We watched it late in the season. He can do that stuff.
Right.
And let's be honest here. You can carry 4 tight ends. Like, you don't have to go out and replace somebody. You can bring back Dwelly if you want to for cheap. You can have Kittle, and you can go draft the guy who can be your blocking tight end, and you can still have 2 vertical style tight ends. But I think Laporta, going to be a third-round pick. Again, yes, Zach Kuntz, Old Dominion, late rounds. Like, I think you have to find a mauler late in the draft. Someone who's not afraid to look a defensive lineman in the eye and say, I'm going to annihilate you. You are not going to get to my quarterback.
Yeah, you're
and right
not
now, besides Kittle,
one of my quarterbacks, right?
Right. And right now they don't have that. So I think Braden Willis, Laporta will be a third-round pick, if not earlier. But even someone like Austin Stogner from South Carolina, like there are plenty of tight ends in this draft, and San Francisco has that draft board ready to go. And Adam Peters is looking there saying, I got 4 tight ends lined up who I think I can work with here. And again, Stogner, Braden Willis, Laporta early. But if you're looking for like a sleeper guy potentially, I'm looking at, I believe his name is Dallin Hoker from BYU. Like, again, names you're like, when you see the name pop up, the pick is in, you're going to go, who the heck is that guy? But they're guys who are so important to the infrastructure of your roster. And when people talk about you got to get a tight end, you don't need that top end number 2. You just need someone that can, again, be that 6th offensive lineman who can come in, make a block or two, give your quarterback more time, and let George Kittle play Travis Kelce, essentially.
Uh,
Wow.
Avatar Singh says the Rams just released Leonard Floyd, who I think could be edge option for the 49ers. Productive rusher, good against the run. I think somebody said he's pretty healthy too. He stays pretty healthy. What do you think about that? I know we're kind of talking tally downs. That I seen that and I've been paying attention to that. Why not, right? Or do you?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's football, right? You go to your division rival.
Anytime you can make your division rival worse by adding one of their players, it's never a bad thing, right? There's a
Right.
reason why Seattle constantly takes our guys once we're done with them. Kerry
Mhm.
Hyder comes to mind, and they don't play as well, and they come back to us and play better. But Leonard Floyd, I think he's going to want to get paid, and I think that might be the concern.
Okay.
Now, again, I like Leonard Floyd. He was not great last year. And I think that for San Francisco, you're going to want, not that they can't make him good, but I think you're going to want someone that flashes a trait. And I don't think Leonard Floyd has a trait. He's a little bendy, but you want the speed rusher, and Leonard Floyd to me seems like he's someone that's slowing down a little bit.
Okay.
Like I don't look at him and go, "Wow, that's a must get kind of guy."
Right.
I look
He
at
doesn't
someone like
do like
Ngakoue,
one thing really well. He's just kind
right?
of a
Which
solid guy.
that's not a knock on him, but it's just something where I look at it and I go, you're a good player, but go play for the Titans, and we'll go sign the big guy. If that makes sense,
Right.
It's like
No, I agree. Yeah, you want to have someone with a trait that stands out. Like you said, Bosa can kind of do it all, right? He's a speed rusher and he's also a somewhat I wouldn't consider him bendy, but he's just so crafty. He has so many different rush plans when he comes at a player. He has the power move, he has the around, he has the when they stunt, he does it all. He's that family, those brothers, and I think he's better than his brother.
oh yeah,
They came in the NFL pro ready, and that doesn't happen. That's why when people were wondering, are they going to pick Quinnen Williams? I remember my nephew being like, they pick Quinnen Williams, I'm out. You have a surefire guy, pick the freaking guy. Because the Niners in the past would pick like a tight end and try to convert him to a linebacker or something like, no, pick a linebacker instead of, you know what I mean? Like, stop overthinking this. So, yeah, he was the guy. He's got it all. And you want someone across from him, like you said, then I agree with you, who has like one trait that he does really well, like a speed guy. Because with D Ford, he manipulated the pocket where teams had to really kick out to block him, and then the inside guys were able to kind of go to work, and then Bosa, of course. So yeah, they needed. I want to see 2019 revisited somewhat with some of these picks. I saw Mac out there. I think he's a little long in the tooth. Personally. Your thoughts on a guy like Khalil Mack? Would you make a move on him, or you stay away? I would assume he would want a lot of money too, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because whenever someone that San Francisco had their eye on or openly said we tried to get that guy, whenever they hit the market again 3 or 4 years later, San Francisco Niner fans go, "What about that guy again?" And I just think, yes, Khalil Mack can do a lot for an organization. Yes, he's still productive, but Khalil Mack's also saying, in my heyday, I was, if not the number one, I believe he won Defensive Player of the Year at a certain point. Like, he's not going to sit there and say, I'll take $5 million. He's going to want 10, 12, $14 million. And I have no idea what his contract was this past year, but sometimes winning can entice somebody over. But even then, like, I think anyone would say yes to Khalil Mack, like if it was a possibility. But I just think with San Francisco, for someone like Khalil Mack to come here, it's going to have to be at a large discount, or it's going to have to be San Francisco saying, "Yes, we'll pay up for you." And I don't see that happening on both parties' ends.
Yeah, I don't either. The Niners are frugal. They pay, but it always has to be in favor of the organization. They find a way to make it favorable where you don't have a bunch of dead money. Although they are paying, did they pay D Ford like $8 million this year or something like that?
Yeah,
It's insane.
yeah, not good, not good.
So we don't want to do that again. Do you think the Niners take every all 11 picks and do something, or do you think there's going to be some moving around. I can't imagine they're going to take 11 guys. When I think maybe 7, 6. You know what I mean? Do they have a ton
Yeah,
of holes? Not really. Maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the good thing is that free agency is first. And I think with free agency, they can fill 2 holes, whether it's a safety, getting the defensive end they like, getting an interior guy they like. But even in the draft this year, because of, and this is actually a really good thing that they don't have to, or they don't have these top end picks, is that the positions they're in need of, that's where the draft is deep at. And so if there's a guy they're really keen on and go, we want him to be on this roster, but he can also be a 5th round pick and they have to move up, they can do that. And like my mind thinks of a guy like Dejuan Johnson from Toledo. He looks like Charles Omenihu 2.0. He can play inside, outside, 3 technique, 5 technique. He can do everything you want. He has the versatility to do what Chris Kosarek looks for, or at least has in guys like Arden Key and Omenihu. And he's probably going to be a day 2, maybe an early day 3 guy, from what I understand. And like he looks like a steal, a guy who just has a high motor, can play all the time, can play anywhere they want to. And so I think it's like they have a luxury of, if they really want someone in the 3rd round or later, even 2nd round or later, they can go and get them. So I would say, yeah, 7 picks. I can even see 6 if they really like somebody and want to move up. I can easily see them saying, we'll draft 6 guys, we'll get a bunch of veteran guys behind them, and hope they pan out.
Tell you what, man. This this went really well. I appreciate your aptitude, and you're good. You're really good. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
always, it's hard, man, because it's like I know anybody who works radio's probably got to work crazy early hours, I would assume, right? So if I
For
can
myself,
squeeze,
it's usually later hours. Usually I
oh,
don't get
you're
home till 1 in the morning.
oh, okay. So okay. So because I had Chasky on, and
Right.
I swear to God, he goes, "Hey, Aaron, everything's good. We'll do the stream, but I'm going to take a nap before the stream, and then I'll be good to
Right.
go." And I'm like, dude, I used to work baking shifts as a baker and had to be into work like 1, 2 in the morning.
Oh,
I
jeez.
always took afternoon naps.
Of
I'd get
course,
home, take a
you need it.
shower. The shower would put me to sleep, and then I would. Problem is my naps would affect my sleep later. So it was like
Of
this
course.
cycle where like every night I couldn't sleep the second half of the day, but like I took the
Right.
nap before. But yeah, let people know, like, you have a lot. Like I told in the beginning of the stream, you have a lot of, not titles, but you you do a lot. Like I didn't even notice the Warriors network coordinator. I went right, I know about 49er Access, and then I saw that you're a producer at 95.7 The Game. What do all those jobs entail for people who want to know?
Yeah, I mean, producing's pretty straightforward. I run the board for a lot of the shows there. Mainly nights because of my morning schedule, but I filled in on shows which I guess previously was known as Damon and Rado, and Steiny and Guru, and I used to work with Bonte and Butch when they were doing Niners pre and post game a couple years ago, and so finding content, running the board, making sure they sound great. And for the Warriors, every Warrior game, I run the board for that show as well.
Wow.
I'm in charge of, getting Tim Roy and Jim Barnett and Tom Tolbert on the air and make sure their sponsors are read, and making sure that all the spots are played, and getting everything sent to all the people that work for the Golden State Warriors and whatnot, and working with RC Davis and James Kincaid on their end and the producers on their end, and then I also hosted during Niners post game a little bit this year. Kind of just doing it all, jack of all the trades there at 95.7 The Game.
It's amazing, man. How old are you? If you don't mind me asking.
Uh, I'm 26. I'll be 27 this year.
Wow. That's freaking, that's it. Yeah, you should be proud of yourself. That's a lot
Thank you.
for someone your age to have on their plate. That sounds intimidating to me,
It
considering like there's so much riding on all those things, you know.
it's a lot of stress, but I'm very thankful that I'm not a baker because I would not be able to bake a cake very well. So,
No, I used to make old fashioned bagels. So you boil them
okay,
and all that, and I would stand in front of a 450-degree oven and probably a 250-degree kettle
Jesus.
So every day I smelled like onions, garlic, and BO, no matter how much I showered the night before. So
Right,
yeah, I
right.
wouldn't want to be a baker. Listen, I in the early okay, so high school in '98 would have been when I graduated. So 2002, if I went to college for 4 years, this particular genre of like content creating or podcast or any of that stuff that didn't exist back then.
Right,
As I've
right,
gotten older and I realize, and I made a YouTube channel like almost 4 years ago. I'm like, son of a, if this would have been around um 15 years ago, I would have known that would be my career. I would have been in
right,
radio or TV because I enjoy talking sports and I'm not the greatest looking guy, but I don't mind being in front of a camera. I'm not
right.
bashful. And I like always talking to other people and having them bounce their opinions. Um, someone in the chats, Ted, he said, "Great guests make great shows." I 100% agree. If you have to pull information out of somebody, whereas with you, it comes freely. It's awesome, and the fact that you have so much responsibility and you made time to come on, my YouTube channel, I've appreciated very, very much.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, thankfully it's my off day, and then there's no Warrior game tonight, so I have all the time in the world. But no,
No
I
wonder
I
you were so
really
jovial about
yeah.
doing it. He's got no responsibility.
Yeah, I went to the theater, saw Scream 6, came right back home. We're doing this thing. So my two favorite things, watching horror movies and talking about the Niners. So it's
That's
it's been a good day,
awesome.
and I really appreciate you having me on.
I would love to do this again if you're ever available. Swear
Of
to God.
course. Just hit me in the DMs and we'll do it again.
All right. Hey, everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being a part of this. Um, it's nothing without you guys. I know I wasn't super into the chat, but Sterling he had my attention. But that's what you want, right? You want the guest to have the attention
Right.
of the
Right.
host. So everybody have a great rest of your evening. I will see everybody probably Monday on No Border Sports channel. We'll be doing the NWO from his channel on Monday. Hopefully we're talking some open, what do they call it when the free agency starts? Legal tampering begins
Right.
Monday. So hopefully we'll have some news, but until then, everyone stay safe and healthy and go Niners. Yeah, on the broadcast.